So, if you're a fan of the Netflix series Bridgerton and you've been chomping at the bit for the next season to come out, there's a new prequel series that's meant to satisfy that craving until the third season arrives. But does it actually quench the desire for more Tawn? Focused on Queen Charlotte's rise to prominence and power, this Bridgerton-verse prequel tells the story of how the young queen's marriage to King George sparked both a great love story and a societal shift, creating the world of the Tawn inherited by the characters in Bridgerton. So in Bridgerton, we've seen glimpses of King George, and we certainly get some snark from Queen Charlotte. But in the second season, we got a tiny bit of wonderful insight into their relationship when Edwina encounters George in his haze. And there were glimpses of deep love that were shown in the Queen's eyes, but we only got a tiny taste of that. Now, there's a whole prequel series devoted to looking at how their relationship came to be and showing the ups and downs of royal life. India Amartefeo plays the young Charlotte, and Golda Rosheuvel reprises her role as the adult queen. And I love that in this series, while the majority of what we watch is carried out in the past, there are portions of the Bridgerton present that allow us into the royal life. Not only watching the queen deal with the people of the Tawn, but also as she navigates the relationships with her family. And the series starts out with a voiceover informing us that this isn't a history lesson. It's fiction inspired by fact. And the voiceover then goes on to say that all liberties taken by the author are quite intentional. Now, it's a great snarky way to begin the show, letting us know that fiction is mixed with some facts. So just sit back and enjoy without getting any historical panties in a ruffle. There are 6 episodes in this season, with each of them running about an hour in length. Now, there are moments when the time is noticeable, especially in some of the repetitive dramatic sequences where our characters are going back and forth on a seemingly endless merry-go-round of the same arguments. Now, this doesn't happen often, but when it does, the pace drags. And the show is filled with dry comedy and emotional drama, but it's mostly centered as a romance. And just like in the Bridgerton series, the turmoil that's raised as the two central figures work through their conflict and pride, it's what makes this engaging, especially because as viewers, we know the couple should be together, even if they haven't figured it out yet, and so it's fun to root them on. And because we know from the Bridgerton series, as well as history, that King George had something going on that affected his mind or his moods, this series tackles the topic by showing us the mindsets of those that are compassionate towards the king, as well as those that are very antagonistic or even ashamed of his condition. And there are also some disturbing sequences where we watch supposed treatments taking place. And it really does make me glad that I can call a doctor or a therapist if I'm having some mental health or physiological issue and then not get some rando quack who wants to inflict all sorts of medieval shenanigans on me. And for me, the chemistry between India Amartefeo and Corey Milcreast, it was wonderful to watch. In a frustrating way, though. There's always the lack of clear communication that muddies relationships, but when they click, there's this passion that's shared between them that is captivatingly palpable. And the way that Amartefeo captures the speaking cadence and the character nuances of how Charlotte has been crafted by Golda Rosheuvel, it's awesome to watch. And I couldn't pick who I liked better in the role. They both embody the character in a way that's endearing and even relatable. And something else I really appreciated from the series is that along with the backstory on Charlotte and George, we get insight into Lady Danbury and her relationship with the Queen. She's had this connection and repertoire with the Queen that we saw throughout the Bridgerton series, but it was never shared on how it came about. Here, not only do we get that background, but we also get to see what her life was like and how she navigated the royal court. And there's a bunch of intrigue, along with conniving and scheming that takes place when the Queen isn't looking. And then it's fun to watch how Lady Danbury works her way through those predicaments. This whole world has consistently had amazing set designs, as well as costuming. And it continues in Queen Charlotte. I mean, everything is lavish and beautiful, just oozing opulence and excess at every turn. And it helps to reinforce the world that we enter to watch the characters live out their lives. Well, I'm not sure I'd want to have to change outfits several times a day just because it's the custom. Some of the color combinations are outstanding, and I would totally love to rock them. And also, with the set designs, I mean, not only do we have these monster-sized homes outfitted with tapestries and paintings, but there's an observatory that's featured as part of the narrative, which I think is a great story addition that plays really well as a subtle storyline throughout Charlotte and George's relationship. And I love how it could just be a location that has no meaning or weight, but multiple times throughout, there are story beats that draw upon conversations that take place in the observatory that then resonate and pluck the heartstrings. The soundtrack and score continue to be one of the high points also in the show. The Vitamin String Quartet provides several instrumental versions of pop hits that are played in a classical way. It's just awesome to listen to. And there's so many other elements within the story that I really liked because of how they tied in with the Bridgerton series. Like Charlotte's relationship with Brimsley and how he's been at her side through it all. Thick, thin, aggravating, and everything. And then there's also an arc that involves Violet Bridgerton, and the way the past and the present are influenced is both touching and humorous, even a bit cringy, but in a good and awkward way. And the show does a good job of balancing the drama and the romance with some lighthearted moments. The show isn't afraid to become dark and touch on story elements that aren't bright and cheery, but it also then uses subtle humor and sarcasm to brighten the mood when it's called for, just to avoid leaving viewers in a depressed state. Now, if you're a fan of the series, I think this is going to be a no-brainer to watch. It has excellent acting, bringing the characters to life by showing both sides of the age spectrum, which allow opportunities to see if any wisdom is gained through years of experience. With a lot of touching romance, the series draws heavily on the struggle between duty and desire, which are complemented by phenomenal sets and costumes, transporting us into the luxurious and extravagant lifestyles of the rich and sometimes famous. The series does feel a bit long in spots, but because it's so emotionally engaging, it's easy to overlook minor pacing issues in favor of rooting for love to bloom. There's a ton of sex, some nudity, some profanity, and also a little bit of violence. I give Queen Charlotte A Bridgerton Story 4.5 out of 5 couches. So are you a fan of this world? Who's your favorite character? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.